evening, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Songwriting Simplified with me, Jonny Lipsham. Here we are on March the 6th. March the 5th. It's March the 6th now for me, but not for you guys in the United States or Canada or that side of the pond. It is still March 5th, but right now it's March 6th for me, which means it's my son's birthday today, and he is just about to turn 13 today. So in a matter of hours, he'll be 13. So that'll be teenager number 2 in the house to go with my 34-year-old. So, yes, welcome everybody. I hope everybody has had a good first half of the week. Been a good one for me. It's been nice and chilled, nice and relaxing so far. My wife is on PTO, so she has been at home as well, which has been a very nice bonus. So we've been able to have lunches and things together. It's been lovely. So tonight we are talking all things songwriting, composing, arranging, and music theory and that kind of stuff. So if you guys have got questions related to any of those, so we could talk about lyric writing, we can talk about rhyming and that kind of thing. We can talk harmony, we can talk melody writing, we can talk arranging for strings, horns, backing vocals, that kind of stuff. And we can also talk music theory as well. So if you've got music theory questions, please do get any questions on any of those subjects into the chat, and I would be happy to help. But I think the thing I wanted to talk about to get us started, if you've got a question, just type at Jonny Lipsham Studios at the start. That shows up my name in red, and that makes it easier for me to see your question. And, oh yes, make sure you are subscribed. If you're watching and you're not subscribed, you won't be able to ask a question at all. You need to hit the subscribe button first, and then give it a couple of minutes, and then the chat will be magically opened up to you, and you can join the party here, and you can ask a question. I can hear birdsong. Where the heck is that coming from? I think I know where the birdsong is coming from. You guys probably can't hear it, but my wife's alarm is going off on her phone, and I believe she is downstairs, so she won't hear the phone. Well, that's brilliant. Anyway, so I was going to talk actually about something that I have been listening to today, and it's a bit of an old song, but I think I have maybe not really listened to it in quite a while. I have been, let's just say, I have been a David Bowie fan for a long time. And to some of you, that may have come as a bit of a surprise because I'm a jazz guy. Why would I be a David Bowie fan when I'm a jazz guy? Well, first of all, there's a few things to get to know about David Bowie, just in case you didn't know already. The first instrument that David ever learned to play was saxophone. He was a tenor saxophone player before he was anything else. And he is a big jazz fan, having spent a lot of time listening to John Coltrane and Charlie Parker. He spent a lot of time listening to guys like them and learning from their music. And so, he was a jazz fan all the way up to his dying day. But I don't think he ever played sax on any of his records that I know of. Some of you out there may well be able to dig up a little nugget of information on that, whether there are actual recordings of him out there playing saxophone. If there are, I would love to find those out and take a listen, because by all accounts he was actually a pretty good sax player from what I heard. But anyway, what I was listening to his last record, Black Star, and there's a song on there which was basically a rearrangement of a song that had appeared, I think, on his penultimate record, and the song is called Sue, or In a Season of Crime, and it's a really, really, really good song. In as much as the subject matter is quite dark, but his vocal is so flipping passionate. It's amazing. When you consider the fact that he recorded it when he was very sick with pancreatic cancer and was going through a pretty grueling chemotherapy process. He was going to chemo and then going to the studio and cutting these songs for the last couple of records that he was going to make. And he knew that they were probably going to be his last couple of records. In fact, when he was writing the songs for Black Star, he knew it was going to be his last record. But Sue, or In a Season of Crime, is a terrific song. And the original recording, I think, was released in 2014. I forget which record it was on. Oh gosh. I'm trying to remember. It was released in 2014. I'm trying to think what record that was off. I have a feeling it was a compilation record. And I think I could be wrong about this. So if somebody knows the answer to this, please put it in the chat and correct me if I'm wrong. But I think it was called Nothing Has Changed. I think that's right. And I think that Sue, or In a Season of Crime, I think was the lead single off that compilation record, I think. But what is brilliant about that song, there's a lot of things that are brilliant about it. But one of the things that was particularly brilliant for me is that it has this curious mixture of drum and bass, and some weird experimental sounds, along with kind of a big band kind of arrangement as well. But I was reading a few things about that because I've just been listening to it pretty much on repeat all day. And I was reading bits and pieces during my lunch break about the song from the tenor sax player Donny McCaslin, who was on that record and played a lot of the sax solo on that. And Donny basically said that when they went in to record Sue, they were working with a big band arranger whose name I've totally forgotten. I think it might have been Maria Schneider, but I'm not 100% sure. I think it might have been her. But anyway, whether it was her or not, I'm not really sure. But anyway, David worked with her and her big band, and they concocted this loose arrangement based around this melody that he had basically hammered out on the piano. And by the time they got into the studio with her big band, plus this rhythm section that is basically Donny McCasley's quartet, they were instructed, I think, by the arranger basically to improvise around the melody and improvise around David Bowie's vocal, and they basically cut it live. But they spent about 3 hours basically just jamming around the melody, with David basically singing over the public address system to the band. So they were hearing him through the talkback, and they were basically just improvising around a groove that Mark Juliana had come up with on drums, and then this bass line that Tim Lefebvre had come up with on upright bass. And they basically just improvised around the melody and around the lyrics and stuff. But essentially, that arrangement was entirely worked out through a jam session, through a 3.5 hour long jam around this song. And through the process of just improvising, they, as a band collectively, had come up with an arrangement for this song. So when you hear that song, pay attention to the arrangement, because a lot of it is completely improvised. and based out of improvisations that have been developed during the rehearsal before they actually started recording. And so the result is a very, very, very exciting, very vibrant arrangement of this particular song. And then when you compare that to the song that's actually, the version of the song that's actually on the Black Star record, the one that's on the Black Star record is much stripped down. It's basically Donny McCaslin's quartet with an additional guitar player and a percussionist. And I think to replace the big band sound, they had two different organs. I think one's a Hammond, and I forget what the other organ is. Can't remember. But it sounds absolutely fantastic. Both arrangements sound, they're quite different, but they are really very, very good. And it's a little bit faster. Bowie's read. Yes, exactly. Bowie's real name, I think you meant real name, not red name. Real name is David Jones. Yes, and he changed his name to David Bowie because of Davy Jones. That's why he did that. So it is well worth checking out. I have a link to it, which I'm going to drop in the chat here. And I highly recommend that after the show, you check this out. So I wanted to talk about this because I wanted to talk about the importance of improvisation in your creative process when you're working out how a song should go. So this is actually part of my process. I know I've often talked about my process being that a lot is worked out in my head and committed to the sound, the arrangement, the chord changes, the melody, and everything else is kind of committed to in my head. And then I get to work in Studio One, basically getting what is in my head to come out of the speakers. That's definitely the vast majority of my process. But there is a part of my process where I will take the ideas that I have in my head and then I will try and kind of develop them a little bit more and work with them a little bit more on the piano. Like if I have a particular set of chord changes going in my head, I will work those through in my head and then I'll start to play them on the piano. And then I will start thinking about, well, can I put chords in between chords here in this particular section of the song and things like that. So that's where I go to work on the piano. And then I start to flesh out my arrangement from there. So improvisation, I think, is a really, really important part of beginning to get your song to start the creative flow going and all of those other ethereal, nefarious terms that nobody can ever codify or define. People talk about their creative zone, their creative juice, their creative vibe. There's all sorts of different ways of describing it that different people have for it. And so I think if this is not something that you do already, then I recommend this as a cool way to get started. Even if you're not a jazz player, you're not into jazz at all, maybe rock is your thing. Start vamping on a couple of chord changes. Start simple. Start with a key that you know that you can sing in, obviously, and work from there. But start with a couple of chords and then start adding other chords to those chords. And develop a rhythmic pattern. If you're a guitar player, start experimenting with different strumming patterns, different tempos, different voicings for the chords. So if you find, hey, I'm always using this standard G chord, this standard C chord, that standard D chord, G, C, D, that everybody plays, try a different voicing, move it up the guitar, try playing it as a bar chord instead and see what comes out. See if you find a different way of voicing the chord. Even if it is a standard chord that you play regularly, find a different way to voice that chord that is going to make moving between those two chords a little bit more interesting. Not just in terms of actually playing it, but in terms of the actual sound between the two chords. And then start from there. Start vamping it out and then start going, okay, I now have these two chords. They sound great. What about if I add two more to the other end, or if I put a chord in between these two chords? And see what you can come up with doing that. Or start even more simply than that. Just start with a little bass line, a little bass vamp. I mean, that's how Sue starts. It starts with a bass vamp on upright bass that Tim Lefebvre is playing, and then things start to gradually start to drift in, and then Mark Juliana's drums come in, and he's playing this breakbeat, which is the least expected thing, I think, for a David Bowie song. I never imagined hearing a David Bowie song that has breakbeats on it, but that's exactly what Mark is playing on the drums, kind of like a jazz-orientated breakbeat. And it just fits that bass part perfectly. And then you've got like a couple of different guitars with lots of different effects on them that fade in. And it sounds absolutely fantastic. And then, of course, you've got the horns, you've got a couple of bass clarinets. In fact, one of the bass clarinets on there is going through a distortion pedal. And you've got a bass trombone, you've got a couple of other trombones, and you've got some trumpets, some flugelhorns, and you've got some clarinets and some bass clarinets and some flutes, some alto flutes, as well as trumpets. So it has a really kind of big band kind of sound to it, but not in the Glenn Miller sense of the big band sound or the Duke Ellington sense. It has kind of a very contemporary big band kind of vibe to it. And it's a shame. To me, it's David Bowie. David Bowie is a massive loss. I mean, it's been 9 years since he died now, but he is a massive loss. Not just as a cultural icon, but as a musician and as a very, very creative musician and songwriter. I would dearly love to see where he would have taken this whole jazz inflected freeform music that he was starting to experiment with on Black Star, where he would have taken that had he lived. Had his cancer gone into remission, and had he lived for, maybe another 10 years, where would he have taken that idea? How far would he have run with it? Or would he have done what he had done in the past, which is kind of have a couple of records in a particular vein and then move on to something else, something completely different? And then, of course, what would that have been? What would it have been? So yeah, he's a massive loss. And he's a massive loss to me personally, because I have loved his music for a long time. Not just, the pop and rock stuff that he did in the 80s and 90s, but, there was always just something different, something interesting musically that went on in his songs that was not usual. I'm not going to say not normal, but certainly not usual, not what you would normally expect for a pop song. There was always something that if you listen to the song 2 or 3 times, you would pick out, oh, that's different. And I could pretty much guarantee I could do that with pretty much every one of his songs, that you just find something, oh, that's different, that you don't normally see, like modal interchange, like tritonal substitutions. These are kind of advanced, jazz harmony concepts. Well, they're not really jazz harmony, that you find tritonal substitutions in late Romantic period, early 20th century classical music. You find it in Tchaikovsky, you find it in Rachmaninoff, you find it in Verese, you find it in Ravel and people like that. So you know, those kind of harmonic concepts are not unique to jazz music. They're there in classical music. If you take a look, you can find those kind of things. But yeah, David Bowie improvising as a method for getting started in working on a song. Because I think for a lot of people, when they actually go, I want to start something new, I want to start a new song. So most people, I think, start too far zoomed out. From a too far zoomed out perspective when they are going to start a song. They start with the blank piece of paper. I think that's the wrong approach. I think the best approach to songwriting is, rather than starting with a blank piece of paper and staring at it going, let's write a song then, let's create. I don't think you get very far and doing it like that. It can take a very, very long time to get anything going doing that. So the thing that I'm thinking about tonight is starting with something simple, like a little bass vamp, even if it's just one note. A little one note played with a little bit of a rhythm, a little bit of an inflection, can start opening up a whole world of possibilities just from one note. For example, you know, just on this G, and I'm adding this F to add a little bit of darkness to it. And I'm deliberately doing short, short, long to create a lopsided rhythmic effect. Now, there's loads of things I could do there. You know, that already suggests kind of a dominant 7 chord, but it could also be a minor 7 chord. It could be a modal thing. It could be, I could play anything over the top of that, and it would pretty much fit. So I could start nice and simple. Why don't I extend that 2-chord idea, which is basically just a stack of fourths, B, E, A, and moving that down to A, D, G. They're ambiguous, they are open, there's no major, there's no minor, there's not even a dominant there. How about we put in a chord in the middle somewhere? Bit of tension there. And again. Now, already I've got the beginnings of something interesting. And already, whilst I was just playing that 3-chord vamp, and it basically starts with just going back and forth between that stack and that stack. And then I introduced this by taking the bottom stack, the A, D, G, pushing that up by a half step. And it's not related to this G bass note at all. It just provides tension there. And then resolving that tension by going back to the first chord. And then I could extend that idea, and I could go a little bit more tonal and go straight to a dominant chord. Or I could just keep going with this kind of whole open modal kind of idea, and I could just find another stack. I could either find something that's more kind of I don't know, G mixed Lydian like, you know, white notes G to G, and find another stack like maybe this one here. Kind of tense. resolve that tension. Let's do that again. So all I've done is move one stack of fourths from there to there to there to there. Sorry, there. And already we've got some really interesting open ideas. Now, already in my mind, I'm starting to think about melody. What would fit over the top of that? And there's a couple of ideas that are running through my head. One is kind of using that G mixolydian mode scale. One is using the G pentatonic scale. Yeah. Something like that. And then there's this pentatonic idea I've got going in my head. Something like that that's going through my head. That's entirely a pentatonic thing, and it would fit what I've played already. And then when we get to this kind of more tense thing, I was going to borrow from the G flat Lydian scale, which is basically C natural, just on that chord. And I could basically build a little, or I could just use just the black notes, pentatonic again. And then go back to that kind of G modal thing. So already I've got a bunch of ideas that I could just start in Studio One right now with that bass part. And I could guarantee you within half an hour, I've got a set of chord changes. I've got a melody that I've just totally improvised. And then I would find a harmony part that goes with that melody. Again, just improvise it and maybe find some, I could go down the whole Sue or a Season of Crime kind of vibe and just, grab some horn section sounds and just start building up an arrangement, a stack of chords just out of a single line instrument just being stacked one on top of the other until I get like a big fat horn section sound. I could do that. And I could probably get that done in a couple of hours. Done. And then I would play that back over and over and over and over again. And start working out some lyrics to go with it. And then I would start adding vocals and things like that. And before I know it, within a couple of days, I probably got a finished song. And it all started from just from that. So songwriting by improvisation is a really great way to get going. Even if you're not very experienced with improv. All right, so we do have a couple of questions here. So I'm going to go up and find this question. So Burlap Studio has a question. He says, I heard something regarding how brass is affected by woodwinds. Okay, can you unpack that a little bit more? What did you hear? Can you summarize that a little bit? Brass is louder than woodwinds. Just because of the materials that they are made out of. They are louder than woodwinds. Some woodwind instruments are very loud. So I'm caveating that sentence because probably the woodwind instrument that definitely isn't a quieter instrument is the saxophone, because essentially it is like a brass instrument with a reed. So, that's why it's a woodwind instrument, is because it has a reed. That's the only reason really why a saxophone is classed as a woodwind instrument, when really it probably should be a brass instrument, but it's not. It's a woodwind instrument with a reed and a mouthpiece. Whereas trumpets, trombones, sousaphones, those kind of instruments, brass instruments, cornets, flugelhorns. There's just a hole that you make a fart sound down, essentially. My brass teacher is going to punch me in the face for saying that, but that's essentially what you do. I've talked about that before. You basically just go like that, and that's how you make your note. And then you just put the mouthpiece up to that, and the air comes out the mouthpiece, and then you put the horn on the end of the mouthpiece, and hey presto, you're playing a brass instrument. So by definition, brass instruments are louder than woodwind instruments. That's not to say that woodwind instruments cannot play loud. They can, but they're just not as loud or as cutting as brass instruments, which is why brass instruments are used for fanfares and clarinets are not. Fundamentally, that's the reason. That's the reason why. But that's not to say you can't get loud woodwinds. You can. But this is why in both big band arranging and orchestral arranging, you tend to keep the brass and the reeds separate, unless the whole band are playing all together. But for the most part, you try and keep the reeds and the brass kind of apart. For two reasons. One, brass has a different timbre and a different kind of, it has a different timbre and a different volume level to it. And then saxophone has, saxophones, clarinets, they have a different timbre as well. So they are in stark contrast to each other. So that's why you kind of separate them. So you will hear, for example, in, for example, Glenn Miller's Moonlight Serenade, for example. The first time you hear the melody, it's the saxophones that are playing the melody, and you have muted trombones and muted trumpets playing accompanying chords. That's the first time you hear the melody. And then the second time you hear the melody, it's reversed. The trumpets are playing the melody, and the trombones are providing a counter melody, and the saxophones are playing chords. Or they're filling up some of the other spaces with kind of what we'd call it soli, but what it really means is they're playing a harmonized melody as a block chord. So it's like block chords moving up and down, spread across the saxophones. So wherever the brass are playing long notes, where you've got the trombones playing the long notes and trumpets playing long notes, the saxophones are filling the gaps with either a counter melody in octaves or unison, or they're playing in 4-part harmony. And so that's kind of standard arranging techniques for a big band. For orchestra, brass tend to have the loud, punchy parts. Woodwinds tend to have the counter to that for that reason. But clarinets and bass clarinets, when you blow them hard, they overblow. And when you do that, they can be raspy. And if you do that in their low register, they can sound very dirty and almost distorted. So if you want that kind of raspy, dark, distorted, messy kind of tone, for woodwinds, those are kind of your best instruments. And on Sue, David Bowie's Sue, you hear that in the big band arrangement of the song. There's bass clarinets and there's bass trombones kind of playing dirty, messy stuff at the low end, and it sounds fantastic. So I'm not sure if that's kind of what you're getting at, but I hope that kind of goes some way to answer that question. Paul Morgan says, back to the jazz idea, what is for example, a 2-5-1 progression that you like to practice over? 2-5-1s. Well, 2-5-1 is a progression. It's basically chord 2, chord 5, chord 1. In whatever key you're in. Is a flute considered a woodwind? Yes, it is. So chord 2, chord 5, chord 1. It's your standard extended perfect cadence, if I'm going to be really technical. Because a perfect cadence is basically chord 5 to chord 1. Because it's the strongest resolution. But if you play it too much, you can get stuck. Which is not something you want to do. So 2, 5, 1 is your standard. It's kind of a standard jazz set of chord changes, but it's also, the strongest resolution to a song. So for practice, I have a backing track that I've created in Studio One, and it's in a loop. Well, it's not now, but it was. It's in a loop. But I've used the arranger track to basically duplicate this section. It's basically a 16-bar loop that does basically 2-5-1s. And what it does is it does 16 bars of 2-5-1 in C major. And then it does 16 bars of 2-5-1s in D flat major, C sharp major. And we keep going up and up and up and up and up until we've been around the whole cycle. We've done all 12 major keys. But here's the interesting part. Every time we go up a step, we go up by 5 beats per minute. So I've used the tempo track to automate that. So we go up a key, we go up in tempo as well. So we go up by 5 beats per minute and up by a half step every time until we've done all 12 major keys. And that's for me to practice improvisation over 2-5-1s. And then once we've done that, the next section of the song is minor 2-5-1, which are different to major. So what I played there was major, which is D minor, G7, C. So if we're in a minor key, we'd be playing D minor 7 flat 5 and G7 sharp 5 to chord 1, C minor. So instead of okay, and that again goes back to the original tempo, and we're in C minor, and we go up a half step, and by 5 BPM every time we go up. And then, after all of that, we do the whole thing again, but this time, the whole thing is 10 beats per minute faster. So that's my practice routine for improvisation over 2-5-1s. So it's actually really quite long. It's probably about 15 to 20 minutes long when you do the whole thing. Going through all 12 major keys, going up in 5 beats per minute increments, and then all 12 minor keys, doing the minor 2-5-1, going up in 5 BPM increments, and then you do the whole thing again. This time, everything is 10 beats per minute faster. So the starting tempo is 10 beats per minute faster. So, so that's what I do. See, what else do we have here? Neil says that simple little bass line is begging for something very dynamic. 16th note percussion with 30% swing, as it would be. Yes. Yeah, that's a great idea. That is a great idea. Giving it just a little hint of a shuffle. Absolutely. I would love to do that. So yes, flute is a woodwind instrument. Bagpipes is also a woodwind instrument. Why is bagpipes, if we're talking Scottish bagpipes, and don't get me started on why I don't like them, because that's a very, very long story. But if we're talking Scottish bagpipes, it's essentially a double reed instrument. The chanter, which is the part of the instrument which you blow into and you cover the finger holes with your fingers, that has a reed in it, a double reed, like an oboe reed, which is it's basically the other side of the mouthpiece. That's where the reed for the chanter is. But the main drone pipes and the melody pipes have reeds as well. And so yes, it is a double reed instrument. It's unique amongst woodwind instruments, but essentially it is a woodwind instrument with a pig's stomach that you squeeze. So you blow, that fills the bag, but also blows down the chanter at the same time. So you're blowing down the chanter and you're filling the bag with air at the same time. And then when you have run out of breath, you use the air bag to keep the sound going. And whilst that's doing it, you breathe. It's a bit of a coordination exercise. So you have to coordinate your breathing with the windbag tucked under your arm, and so that the sound is completely continuous. So you basically breathe alternately with the bag, and that's how that works. It's a complicated instrument. It predates equal temperament by many hundreds of years. So it was never designed with equal temperament in mind, which is why it has a range of about a minor ninth, potentially a ninth, but it's not quite a ninth. So what do I mean by that? It's an octave and a tone, more or less. Octave and a tone. But here's the thing. The low note is, the lowest note on the bagpipes is a little bit flat. The high note is a little bit sharp. It's almost a quarter tone flat and just a hair over a quarter tone sharp. But the intervals are not exact. So if you're playing with other bagpipers, that's fine, because it all has this, everybody has the same intonation problem. It's fine. But if you are like the Red Hot Chili Pipers, who play with guitars and drums and basses, and they're essentially a heavy rock band with bagpipes. By the way, check them out, the Red Hot Chili Pipers. They are freaking awesome. I have been to see them a bunch of times, and they are wonderful. They are really, really, really good. And their show is hilarious. It's outstanding. They have flamethrowers built into the pipes, so you've got flames coming out the top. It's absolutely awesome. And they play a lot of Red Hot Chili Peppers songs, obviously, but it's not the only thing that they play. They play a whole bunch of other things. But you have to play bagpipes a little bit differently when you're playing with instruments that are designed with equal temperament in mind, like guitars, basses, keyboards, and things like that. So you have to adjust the intonation with various techniques. There are a bunch of techniques whereby you can adjust the intonation, but the thing you have to remember is that top note and that bottom note are out of tune regardless. So not a lot you can do about those, because they are tricky. Let's see. Regarding don't get me started on a long story, I lulled when you said that. Getting you started on a long story is what we in the chat do best. Yes, you do. This is exactly what you guys do, especially in Songwriting Simplified. You like to get me on a wee rant. But I'm not. I'm resisting with every ounce of my being, with every fiber of my soul. I am resisting the temptation to go into a rant as to why I don't like bagpipes. And I'm Scottish. But I've kind of hinted at the base reason why. And it's because of the tuning. Oh dear God, it's the tuning. I need to have a drink with that thought in my mind. Don't worry, it's lemonade. Yes, the tuning. But I'm not going there. Not going there. Nope. We're not going there. Nice try, Neil. We have 10 minutes left of the show. Please, somebody ask something that is not bagpipe related. But I will give one caveat when it comes to pipe instruments. Okay, two. One is the Irish pipes, the Irish traditional pipes, which are called the Alean pipes. They are a thing of beauty. They don't have those intonation issues. Yes, they were not designed with equal temperament in mind, but they have a much softer tone. They are much more malleable you can pitch bend and things like that with Alean pipes that you can't really do with Scottish pipes. I played in a band. They were kind of like a traditional Irish funk band is the best way I can explain what they did. Traditional Irish funk. We played kind of jigs and reels with a backbeat, basically, and some slap bass. So it was like Mark King slap bass, Miles Davis-y kind of chord changes with jigs and reels on the top. And the front line of the band was electric violin, Alean pipes, and Akai Iwi, which is basically the electric wind instrument made famous by Michael Brecker. And that was the front line of the band. And we had keyboards, guitar, and as I said, bass and drums. And I played drums in that band. Boy, was it a great band. It was really, really great fun. But yeah, Alean pipes is a thing of beauty. And the other pipe instrument that I'm going to give a caveat to is the pipe organ. I love the sound of pipe organ when it is played really, really well. I have a friend who, she isn't anymore, but she was the organist at the Church of St. Martin in the Fields in London. And she was there for a long time as their principal organist. And she occasionally plays with the London Symphony Orchestra when they do the proms at the Albert Hall. She has the privilege of playing the grand pipe organ at the Royal Albert Hall. And she is amazing. She is a phenomenal organ player. And she's a really good laugh. She's a really good friend as well. And she did this thing when she was playing at the church and she was playing traditional hymns. She would get to the last verse of the hymn and she would start slipping in modal interchanges, tritonal substitutions. She would extend chords. She would add sharp 11s and things like that to the chords. She was terrific. And I think she ended up getting into a lot of trouble for playing too jazzy one Sunday. And we had jam sessions on the organ at the Church of St. Martin in the Fields, and we would play giant steps and things like that. And she could play the bass part on the pedals and everything. And then I'd use the one of the upper manuals to improvise on. It was great fun. And she taught me to love pipe organ because when I first got to know her, I was just like, yeah, pipe organs. Yeah. But she taught me to appreciate them and to appreciate the enormous amount of skill and coordination and technique that goes into making those things work and playing them skillfully. Okay. Neil says, well, hey, I'm Canadian and not only do I not watch hockey, but as a kid, I never even learned how to skate. Well, good for you, Neil. And I don't think you are the only Canadian I know who is like that. I know an awful lot of Canadians because I have family in Canada. My great-grandfather emigrated to Canada. And he was part of establishing soccer leagues in Canada. That was one of the things he did before he died. But yes, I have a lot of family in Canada, and a lot of them are hockey fanatics, and that's kind of how I got into ice hockey. Can I skate? No. I have no sense of balance, so why would I ever learn to skate? Because I have no sense of balance. I have a very, very, very... I don't talk about this very often. In fact, I think I've never talked about this. But I have a very, very, very minimal form of a cerebral palsy. It is there. It is genuine. I was diagnosed when I was about 18 months old. And the way it affects me is it affects my short-term memory, and it affects my coordination. I still to this day cannot tie my shoelaces. I find doing those kind of fine motor skills like you have to with doing shoelaces, my brain is sending the correct messages to my fingers to do, but my fingers go, no, we'd much rather play piano, you idiot. And they don't want to do it. So I am completely incapable of tying my own shoelaces, literally. But I also don't exactly walk in a straight line either, because my balance is affected. So yeah, I would not do very well with skating, but I live vicariously through my family members who are professional hockey players. Because I would love to do what they do. And it would just never be something I could ever dream of doing, unfortunately. But it is what it is. I do other things. The accordion, it has reeds in it as well. Yes, it does. My sister-in-law is an accordion player, and she is very, very good. She doesn't play it very often because she is a very busy nurse, but when she gets a moment, she does. Korn also make the bagpipes work with 7-string guitars. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of Korn, but I've heard some of their songs. And they do some very, very interesting things with 7-string guitars in some very interesting tunings. Nothing really standard about the tunings that they use on their guitars. I quite like 7-string guitars, though. And I'll tell you why, because a friend of mine, maybe about 3 or 4 years ago, introduced me to Gent, which was something I'd never heard of before. But he's a jazz guitar player, and he introduced me to Gent, and he said, you got to check this music out, man. You would totally dig it. And we started listening to this music, and I actually genuinely started digging this kind of music. I actually really like Gent, believe it or not. Because there's complex rhythms that they do there. And there's some pretty complex chord voicings that happen as well. And some of it's kind of modal as well. So for a lot of reasons, I like Gent. And that seems to be done quite a lot with either drop D tunings on basses and guitars or 7-string guitars. And so my friend introduced me to his 7-string guitar, and he has a 7-string baritone guitar as well. It's pretty awesome. And he showed me, baritone, you don't have to just play, the dark grungy kind of stuff on baritone. He showed me you can play funk on baritone guitar, and it sounded freaking awesome. And of course, there's AC/DC Long Way to the Top. That's a good tune, that one. Again, I'm not an AC/DC fan, not by a long stretch, but it is a very, very, very well crafted song. Faux show. Alright, so I think we are done, because it is now 0100 here in the southeast corner of Scotland, which I forgot to say at the intro is, of course, the capital of everything, including all dimensions known and all dimensions yet to be discovered. Just so we get that part out of the way. And I also forgot to name check everybody that's in the chat, so I apologize for that. Like I said, my memory does get affected, and I do forget things. I would forget my own name if it wasn't written into the back of all of my clothing. Let's just put it like that. Anyway, we are all done and dusted for another episode of Songwriting Simplified. Thank you very much, all 23 of you who joined, and all 20 of you who smacked the like button right between the eyes and never apologized for breaking its nose. I appreciate the heck out of you guys. You guys are the best. Appreciate you guys a lot. Thank you very, very much. That was almost, but not quite, record attendance for Songwriting Simplified. I think the record stands at 30 for Songwriting Simplified. So I was watching it going up to 24 and I was thinking, come on, just 5 more people. That would be awesome. The record attendance for Sunday Night Live is 46. And that was when we did our Studio One 6 live stream. The very first Studio One 6 live stream had 46 people at it. That was an amazing attendance. Which we've not touched since. Not even for Studio One 7 did we touch that. So it'd be nice if we could get back up there again. So speaking of, we have Sunday Night Live coming up on this Sunday. So be there or be somewhat dodecahedron shaped or something. I will see you folks then. Have a great rest of your week and a great Saturday with your family and your friends. And I'll see you on Sunday for Songwriting Simplified. No, not for Songwriting Simplified. That's today for Sunday Night Live on Sunday because it's Sunday and we call it Sunday Night Live on Sundays. Not Songwriting Simplified. I'd better go to bed. Good night, everybody. Damn it.